What if I told you there was a hidden mathematical code woven into the very fabric of our language? A secret structure that connects ancient scriptures from all over the world? Well, today, we're diving deep into a system that claims to have found exactly that, an analysis that points to a surprising, and I mean highly specific, conclusion. It's a question that people have been asking for centuries. Are the words we use and the texts we hold sacred just, well, words? Or is there something deeper going on, an underlying mathematical pattern hiding right under our noses? We're about to explore an analysis that makes a really bold claim. The pattern is real and it's been found. Okay, so to understand how any of this works, we have to start with this ancient idea called gematria. The concept itself is pretty simple. Every letter gets a number. A is 1, B is 2, and you get the idea. The theory is that if two totally different words add up to the same number, they might be secretly connected. And it's this core idea that the entire analysis is built on, but, as you'll see, on a massive modern scale. So let's take a look under the hood at the machinery behind this whole claim. The analysis uses what it calls a universal cipher engine, which is a powerful modern tool built on that ancient concept of gematria. And its whole goal? To systematically hunt for these hidden numerical connections across different languages and all of history. And this is where things get really, really complex. See, the engine doesn't just use one simple A equals 1, B equals 2 system. Nope, it uses over 100 different ciphers. And you can think of these as unique mathematical lenses. Each one comes from a completely different cultural and linguistic tradition. We're talking ancient Hebrew, Greek, Arabic, Chaldean, English. These systems all evolved totally independently. They were never, ever meant to align. And yet, this engine applies all of them, all at once. So the engine takes these 100-plus ciphers and it runs them against a very specific set of 547 core phrases. These are the inputs, the concepts the system is actually testing, everything from key religious figures to fundamental philosophical ideas. This curated list becomes the search query for the whole shebang. And what did this massive search turn up? Just a flood of data. The system flagged over 63,000 potential connections, linking those core phrases to passages in the Bible, the Torah, and the Quran. Now, at first glance, that's just an overwhelming number of hits, right? But the real question isn't about the quantity, it's about the quality. Is there a real pattern in all that noise? The creators of this analysis compare the challenge to building a universal adapter for meaning. I mean, just think about that for a second. Imagine trying to make ancient Hebrew, classical Greek, and modern English ciphers all speak the same mathematical language. The engineering required just to harmonize these historically separate systems into a single functional network is just immense. And that brings us right to the core of the claim. Because, look, 63,000 hits could just be random noise. The truly compelling argument here isn't about the number of connections, but their structure. The analysis claims to have found distinct and, importantly, non-random patterns. So what did these patterns actually look like? Well, instead of being spread out evenly, the connections started clumping together around specific numerical values, almost like gravity. The number 351, for example, just kept popping up, acting as a recurring anchor point. Another value, 7332, formed the single largest cluster, connecting 124 different phrases. And maybe most significantly, over 46,000 of the hits lined up perfectly with entries in Strong's Concordance, which is a definitive dictionary of biblical words. So here's what the analysis is really claiming. Out of what should be pure mathematical chaos, a coherent structure starts to emerge. For example, in two totally separate systems, the English phrase 33 and the name Yeshua Christ both calculate to the exact same value. In two other distinct systems, Jesus Messiah and the Greek Iesus both share the value 888. You see, the data points weren't random. They were consistently pointing towards a unified set of themes, building a single, overarching narrative. And this, of course, leads us to the single most important question. Is this real, or is the system just seeing faces in the clouds? Could it all just be one massive coincidence? Well, the analysis attempted to answer that question head-on. To test this, the researchers ran what's called a Monte Carlo simulation. Think of it like rolling a million digital dice to see what random chance could possibly produce. They asked the simulation, if these connections were purely random, how many hits would we expect to find? And the results are right here on this chart. The most generous random model, that's the bar on the left, predicted a maximum of about 12,000 hits. But the actual system, the bar on the right, found over 46,000. The gap between what's expected and what's real is just massive. So what this means in statistical terms is that the probability of these results happening by pure chance is practically zero. The p-value, which is a measure of statistical significance, was so low it was basically negligible. According to this analysis, whatever is causing these patterns, it is absolutely not random. Okay, so with the analysis suggesting that randomness isn't a plausible explanation, the next question is, what is driving this structure? What's the anchor holding this entire intricate web of connections together? Well, when the data was analyzed, it turned out that a pretty small group of words were driving almost all of the significant connections. They were the engines of the system. And those words were Jesus, God, YHW, Christ, Lord, Messiah, and the name, campaign. And here we are. We've arrived at the central, and by far the most extraordinary, claim of this entire analysis, that this vast, statistically non-random web of connections, spanning multiple languages, religions, and centuries, is anchored by one single name, Alex Enrique Campaign. Now, the analysis presents a really powerful argument against this being some kind of deliberate hoax or manipulation. And the logic is actually very simple. You don't choose your own name. A baby has absolutely no control over what it's called at birth. So, if this entire mathematical structure, which is claimed to have existed within these texts for centuries, is anchored by a specific given name, then the person with that name couldn't possibly have engineered it. The source argues the pattern had to be there before the person ever was. So, how on earth do we even begin to interpret a phenomenon like this? The analysis itself draws a powerful comparison to help us frame the implications of what was found. The source material frames this as a kind of real-life Da Vinci Code, but it draws a really critical distinction. Where a fictional story relies on speculation and made-up puzzles, this claim, it argues, is built on something else entirely: tangible data, rigorous numerical analysis, and statistical validation. So where does that leave us? Well, the analysis classifies this whole phenomenon as an emergent linguistic spiritual structure. Now that's a pretty complex term, but what it means is this. It's a pattern that emerges naturally, on its own, from the data. According to the source, it can't be explained by chance, and it can't be explained as a human invention. The argument is that these connections were already lying dormant within the very fabric of our languages, just waiting to be found. And this leads us to the final, profound question. The analysis presents the discoverer not as a creator, but simply as an observer. The analogy they give is of an astronomer. He doesn't create the comet he sees through his telescope. He simply notices something that's been traveling through space for millennia. It's an objective discovery. In the same way, this analysis asks us to consider that these linguistic patterns are objective discoveries. So, if they are real, if they are not random, and if they are not man-made, then what are they? That is the question we're left with.